The nursery was a chamber bathed in pale, clinical light, its sterile surfaces gleaming with the cold precision of technology. Rows of glass children lay in their translucent cribs, their delicate forms shimmering faintly under the artificial glow. Elara stood silently by the threshold, her sharp eyes, reflective and searching, fixed on the child in the center. This was Lumen, the anomaly, the fragile bearer of a secret that shattered the orphanage's imposed order. A gentle stillness settled over the room, broken only by the faint hum of the climate regulators and the subtle, almost imperceptible pulse emanating from beneath Lumen's ribs. Elara's breath caught as she leaned a little closer. There, beneath the fragile lattice of glass, a faint glow pulsed rhythmically, like a beacon of life in a sea of artifice. Her heart stirred, a mixture of awe and dread tightening her chest. Lumen's eyes, deep pools of translucent clarity, flickered with a sudden spark of vitality. Tentatively, the child extended a trembling hand towards the nearest glass child, a smaller figure whose body gleamed like spun crystal. Their fingertips brushed, and the contact produced a delicate chime, soft, crystalline, and hauntingly beautiful. Light fractured and scattered, casting prismatic shards that danced across the nursery walls. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no mere reflection or trick of light. The pulse beneath Lumen's ribs was real, its beating heart setting off a cascade of shimmering reflections that seemed to breathe life into the room. The glass children, usually so still and silent, responded subtly, their forms flickering as though stirred by a gentle breeze. The fragile flames of their existence wavered, casting a kaleidoscope of colors that softened the orphanage's sterile silence. From behind Elara, a soft voice whispered. Myra stepped closer, her warm eyes mirroring the spectrum of light. "It's more than we imagined," she said quietly, reaching out to touch Elara's arm. "He's a sign." A hope, Elara turned, meeting Myra's gaze. The assistant caretaker's presence was a balm to the cold loneliness that often gripped her. "But what does it mean?" Elara murmured, her voice thick with uncertainty. "If Lumen's heart is real, what does that say about the children? About this place?" Myra sighed, her breath a gentle exhale in the still air. "It means the line between life and artifice is thinner than we thought. That maybe there's more to protect than glass and light." The revelation stirred something deep within Elara, a tumult of emotions she had long kept buried. The orphanage was no longer just a sterile sanctuary. It was a crucible of ethical conflict, a battleground between control and compassion. The fragile bodies of the glass children symbolized innocence endangered by cold authority, but Lumen embodied something greater. Defiance, hope, the pulse of genuine life. As Lumen's hand lingered on the glass surface of the nearest child, reflections cascaded around them like ethereal wings, enveloping the room in a shimmering embrace. The moment felt suspended in time, a fragile heartbeat in the vast machinery of the orphanage. Elara stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch Lumen's glowing chest. The warmth beneath the glass was faint but undeniable, a stark contrast to the coldness that had pervaded her world. She whispered softly, almost a prayer, "You are not alone." The pulse quickened, as if responding to her words. In that instant, the boundaries between artificial and living blurred, revealing a fragile truth, that even in a world built on control and cold precision, life could bloom unexpectedly, fragile yet fierce. The nursery seemed to breathe with renewed life. The glass children shifted, their delicate forms reflecting the myriad colors of hope and fear intertwined. Elara's resolve hardened. She would protect this fragile heartbeat, this flicker of genuine life, no matter the cost. Outside, the orphanage's cold halls awaited her decision, shadows lengthening as secrets deepened. But within the nursery, amidst the fractured light and delicate forms, a new pulse echoed, the heart's pulse of rebellion, resilience, and the fragile promise of tomorrow. And as Elara stood guarding the fragile flame of Lumen's life, she knew the path ahead would be perilous. Yet, in the haunting melancholy mingled with desperate hope, she found a strength she had never known before. The heart's pulse was more than a secret. It was a call to action, a beacon in the darkness, a fragile shining truth that could not be silenced. And so, the story of the glass children, of innocence and reflection, of fragility and resilience, took a new and uncertain turn, the fragile heartbeat at its core beating steadily into the unknown. The sterile corridor of the orphanage hummed with the low, incessant drone of air circulation and distant mechanical whirs. Elara stood silently by the observation window, her sharp, reflective eyes tracing the movements of the glass children within the ward. They moved with a fragile grace, their translucent limbs catching the cold fluorescent light, casting fractured reflections on the polished floor. The air was thin with a clinical chill, and in that moment, Elara felt the weight of the orphanage's demands pressing down on her. Across the room, caretaker Dane paced steadily. His posture was rigid, his movements precise and unyielding, like the clockwork mechanisms embedded deep within the orphanage's design. He called the children to order with a flat voice, his words void of warmth or hesitation. "Line up for the daily maintenance inspection," he instructed, his tone more command than request. The glass children obeyed, their bodies shimmering softly as they moved into formation. There was a mechanical rhythm to their obedience, a quiet surrender to the protocols that dictated their existence. Elara's gaze softened as she watched Lumen step hesitantly to the front, his faintly glowing heart pulsing beneath the fragile surface. She knelt beside him, careful not to startle the delicate child. Her breath misted the glass as she whispered, "You're safe here, Lumen. I won't let anything happen to you." Nearby, Dane's eyes flickered toward Elara, unreadable and cold. "Caretaker Elara," he said sharply, "your leniency endangers the order we must maintain. The children require discipline, not indulgence." Elara met his gaze steadily, her voice firm but gentle. "They're not machines, Dane. They feel even if their bodies are fragile. We owe them more than just rules." Before Dane could respond, the heavy metallic clatter of boots echoed down the hall. Security lead Royce appeared, his imposing figure casting a long shadow. Clad in dark tactical gear, his cold eyes swept the ward with a calculating scrutiny. The glass children recoiled subtly, their delicate forms trembling with apprehension. Royce's voice was low and uncompromising as he addressed the caretakers. "Director Voss has ordered heightened security measures. No deviations from protocol will be tolerated." Elara's heart clenched. The orphanage's walls seemed to tighten around her, the sterile coldness seeping into her bones. She glanced at Lumen, whose faint pulses beat steadily beneath his fragile ribs. "We must protect them," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Later, in the dim light of a small break room, Elara found herself alone with Dane. The tension between them was palpable, a quiet storm brewing beneath polite facades. "Your compassion blinds you," Dane said quietly but firmly. "The children's fragility is a liability. Strict adherence to rules is the only way to ensure their survival." Elara shook her head, frustration lacing her voice. "Survival without dignity is no life at all. They deserve more than to be caged by fear and control." Dane's expression hardened. "You risk everything with your softness. Remember, Director Voss's orders are clear." Elara's eyes darkened with resolve. "Then I'll find a way to protect them, even if I have to stand against the entire orphanage." The clash of philosophies hung in the air, a fragile balance teetering on the edge of fracture. Outside, Royce's patrol continued relentlessly, a grim reminder of the forces arrayed against Elara's tender guardianship. As the day faded, Elara returned to the ward, her fingers brushing lightly over Lumen's cool glass arm. The child's faint pulse echoed in her mind, a beacon of hope amid the encroaching shadows. She understood now more than ever that beneath the surface of this cold, clinical world, a storm was gathering, one that would test the limits of fragility, resilience, and the very meaning of life itself. The chapter closed with Elara's whispered vow lingering in the stale air. "I will protect you, no matter the cost." The orphanage slept uneasily, but for Elara, the night was alive with the quiet promise of resistance and the haunting question of what it truly meant to be human in a world built on glass. The cold glow of the holographic screens splintered across the maintenance room's metallic surfaces, casting fractured light that danced as if hesitant to fully illuminate the secrets held within. Elara crouched beside a console, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated encrypted folders, each file a shard of the hidden truth she sought. Beside her, Jax's disheveled frame leaned into the glow, his quick eyes darting over streams of data with the practiced urgency of someone who had once been part of this world, but now stood defiantly against it. "Here," Jax whispered, voice low and urgent, "this is what they're hiding, the real purpose behind the glass children. It's not just about care or preservation. It's control, commodification. They want to weaponize innocence." Elara's breath hitched. The sterile walls of the orphanage suddenly felt suffocating, the weight of cold authority pressing down like an invisible hand. Her reflective eyes caught the shards of light bouncing off the glass children's pods nearby, each child a delicate prism of translucent fragility, innocence trapped and shaped by unseen hands. "They're exploiting them," she murmured, "using them as tools, not as lives." Jax nodded grimly. "And Lumen, that child is the key, the anomaly they fear but also want to control." Outside the maintenance room, the soft footsteps echoed faintly. Myra moved quietly through the corridors, her presence a balm against the rising storm. In the nursery, she knelt beside a trembling glass child, her voice a gentle tide of warmth amidst the sterile chill. The child's translucent form flickered under the dim corridor lights, casting fleeting reflections like tiny stars caught in fragile glass. "SHHH," Myra whispered, her hand hovering delicately above the child's fragile shoulder, careful not to disturb the brittle shell. "You're safe, we're here." The child's eyes, pools of shimmering translucence, met Myra's with a fragile trust, a brief flicker of hope rekindling in the dimness. Back in the shadowed maintenance room, Elara's gaze shifted to a towering reflective panel that divided the space, its surface a mirror that fractured her image into countless shards. She saw herself multiplied, each reflection a shard of vulnerability and strength intertwined, a silent echo of the children she tended. The motif of reflection, always present, now felt like a revelation. She was part of them, fragile yet unyielding. "I can't let them win," Elara spoke softly, more to herself than to Jax. "They don't understand what it means to be alive, even if that life is fragile." Jax reached out, gripping her shoulder with rough but steady hands. "Then we fight, together." The distant hum of the orphanage's ventilation system was punctuated by faint, almost ghostly whispers, the surreal murmurs of the glass children, their behaviors growing ever more otherworldly, as if sensing the encroaching danger. Elara felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on her shoulders, but within it, a flicker of fierce determination. She glanced down at her hands, the soft skin contrasting with the brittle glass she so carefully protected. The lines between artificial creation and genuine life blurred more each day, and the truth they uncovered was a jagged fracture threatening to shatter their fragile sanctuary. "We need to warn Myra," Elara said, eyes reflecting the glow of the screens. "The children need to be ready." Jax nodded, fingers already moving to secure the data and prepare for what was to come. As they slipped from the maintenance room, the orphanage around them seemed to hold its breath, its cold walls reflecting not just light, but the mounting peril. In that moment, Elara felt the fragile heartbeat of hope beneath the glass, a pulse she would guard with every fiber of her being. The shards of truth had been uncovered, but the battle for innocence was just beginning. And in the fractured reflections of glass and soul, Elara understood. To protect life's fragile flame, she must first confront the darkness within and beyond. The orphanage's silence was no longer empty. It was charged with the promise of resistance, the trembling echo of lives determined not to break. As Elara and Jax vanished down the sterile corridors, the children's whispers grew louder, weaving a haunting melody of fragile hope that defied the cold grip of control. Outside, beyond the walls of glass and steel, shadows stirred. The fight for the heart of the orphanage had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sterile silence of the orphanage was shattered by the abrupt wail of alarms, a piercing sound that cut through the cold air like a jagged shard of glass. Elara's sharp, reflective eyes snapped open as the emergency lights bathed the hallways in a fractured blue glow, casting prismatic shards of light against the translucent bodies of the glass children. Somewhere deep in the building, the unmistakable crunch of heavy boots echoed, an intrusion into this fragile sanctuary. Her heart tightened, a hollow ache swelling within her chest. She had sensed the creeping shadow of control tightening its grip, but this was an invasion. Director Voss's agents were here. The cold tendrils of his ambition had breached the walls she had vowed to protect. "Myra," Elara whispered urgently, her voice barely audible over the wailing alarms. "The children, prepare them. We don't have much time." Myra's warm eyes met hers, steady and reassuring. "I'll keep them calm," she promised, moving swiftly to the nearest cluster of glass children. Their translucent forms shimmered, delicate and eerie, reflections dancing in their fragile surfaces. The children, usually so silent and still, now trembled with a quiet fear that the caretakers both shared and fought against. Elara's gaze flicked toward the central chamber where Lumen lay. The child's glass body pulsed faintly, the soft glow of a real beating heart visible beneath the fragile ribs, a secret she had vowed to guard with her life. She moved quickly, her slender frame weaving through the corridors as the sound of boots grew louder, the agents' voices sharp and commanding. She reached Lumen's side just as a harsh voice barked orders nearby. "Secure the child, no mistakes." Elara crouched beside Lumen, her hands trembling but determined. She traced gentle, protective lines over the child's translucent skin, feeling the faint warmth beneath. "You're safe with me," she whispered, more to steady herself than the silent child. Outside, Jax moved like a shadow, his disheveled figure slipping through security checkpoints with practiced ease. He disabled cameras and electronic locks, his quick fingers dancing over consoles, each action a small rebellion against the corporate machine. His eyes darted anxiously, reflecting the flickering lights, as he whispered warnings to Myra, who balanced her nurturing warmth with a steel resolve. "They're coming through the east wing," Jax hissed into a comlink. "We have to hold the line." Myra nodded, her presence a calming anchor amid the swelling panic. She gathered the children, speaking softly, her voice a balm against the terror. "Stay close, little ones. We'll get through this together." The sterile halls, once a place of cold order, now felt alive with tension, every shadow a potential threat. Elara's mind raced, the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. Director Voss's face appeared on a surveillance screen nearby, his cold eyes glinting behind reflective glass panes. The man embodied the merciless force that sought to control and exploit the fragile lives under her care. But Elara was no longer the detached scientist she had been. The breach had ignited a fierce protectiveness, a raw courage she hadn't known she possessed. With a steadying breath, she rose, eyes blazing with defiance. "We will not let them take you," she vowed, her voice resolute. "Not while I still breathe." The orphanage trembled on the precipice of chaos, the fragile line between survival and destruction thinner than ever. Yet within that fragility lay a stubborn hope, an ember of life that refused to be extinguished. As footsteps approached and shadows lengthened, Elara steeled herself for the battle to come. The breach was only the beginning, and she would fight with every shard of her being to protect the glass children who had become her world. The cold lights flickered, the alarms blared, and somewhere beneath the fragile surfaces, a heart beat fiercely, an echo of life against the dark. Outside the ward, Royce's silhouette loomed, a ruthless specter enforcing orders with merciless precision. The clash between control and compassion was imminent, and the orphanage's fragile sanctuary would never be the same. Elara's breath caught as she heard the first crash of the security breach, glass trembling beneath her touch. In that moment, she made a silent promise. No matter the cost, she would guard this fragile world with her life. For Lumen, for all the glass children, and for the fragile hope that still flickered in the shadows. The battle had begun. The sterile hum of the orphanage was punctuated by distant alarms. A cold, unyielding sound that vibrated through the metal beams, and tiled floors like a warning. Elara moved quickly, her slender frame weaving through the labyrinth of narrow corridors with practiced ease. Her sharp eyes, reflective and luminous, much like the glass children she tended, scanned every corner, every flicker of shadow. The sanctuary she had painstakingly maintained was fracturing under the weight of an imminent assault, and the fragile balance was teetering dangerously. In a dimly lit room tucked away behind reinforced glass panels, Elara found Myra and Jax waiting, their faces etched with concern yet resolute determination. Myra's soft features were shadowed by worry, but the warmth in her eyes never faltered. Jax, disheveled and sharp-eyed, exuded restless energy, his fingers twitching as if eager to dismantle the very system that oppressed them. "We don't have much time," Elara whispered, her voice steady though her heart raced. "They're moving faster than we anticipated. If Royce and his men breach the East Wing, the children won't stand a chance." Jax nodded, pulling up a flickering holographic map of the orphanage's layout. Lines of light traced corridors and rooms, some pulsing red where security had been compromised. "I've been working on disabling the lockdown protocols," he said, voice low but urgent. "If we can hold the main corridor, we can funnel them into a bottleneck. It won't be perfect, but it buys us precious minutes." Myra placed a comforting hand on Elara's arm. "And the children, we must keep them calm. Their reactions, their behaviors are unpredictable. The more frightened they become, the more fragile they feel." Elara's gaze drifted to the heart of the room where Lumen stood, silent and still. The child's translucent form shimmered faintly under the sterile lighting, every movement casting fractured reflections across the walls. Beneath the fragile glass ribs, a faint pulse of light throbbed rhythmically, a real, beating heart that defied the cold artifice surrounding them. Lumen's quiet vitality was a beacon of hope, but also a vulnerability that Elara felt keenly in her bones. She stepped forward, her voice soft and steady. "We protect them, all of them, but especially Lumen. The moment they realize what the child is, the moment they try to take it away," her voice broke, but her resolve did not. Jax and Myra exchanged glances, understanding the unspoken fear that gripped them all. As they prepared their defenses, the orphanage itself seemed to pulse with surreal energy. The other glass children moved in patterns that were almost ritualistic, their delicate limbs casting kaleidoscopic shards of light that danced on the walls and floors. Their movements were both mesmerizing and unsettling, a fragile ballet that echoed innocence endangered by encroaching darkness. Suddenly, a harsh clang echoed from the corridor outside. Security lead Royce appeared, his form imposing and relentless. His footsteps pounded against the floor, a grim herald of the storm to come. Elara's breath caught as Royce's cold eyes swept the room, calculating and merciless. "You cannot stop this," he said, voice like ice. "Director Voss has orders, the anomaly must be contained." Elara stepped forward, meeting his gaze. "These are children," she said quietly, but with fierce determination. "Fragile, yes, but alive and deserving of protection." Royce's expression hardened, but before he could respond, a sudden shimmer rippled through the room. Lumen reached out, fingertips grazing the glass surface of a nearby pane. The light fractured and multiplied, casting a dazzling array of colors that momentarily disarmed the tension. In that fleeting moment, Elara saw not just the vulnerability of their existence, but the resilient spark that refused to be extinguished. "We stand together," she said, voice rising with conviction. "Fragile alliances, yes, but strong enough to hold." The battle for the orphanage had begun, a desperate struggle where every choice was a risk, every moment a fragile thread in the tapestry of hope and survival. As alarms grew louder and footsteps advanced, Elara's heart beat in time with Lumen's, a steady rhythm amid the chaos, a promise that even in the face of shattering darkness, light could endure. And with that, she stepped into the fray, ready to defend the fragile lives that had become her own. The air was thick with tension as the trio moved swiftly through shadowed hallways, their whispers barely audible over the distant echoes of pursuit. Each step was measured, every breath a reminder of the stakes at hand. Elara's mind raced, calculating and recalibrating, but beneath it all lay an undercurrent of raw emotion, fear, hope, and a fierce love that defied logic. Myra's gentle presence was a balm to the group's frayed nerves. Her soft voice coaxed the glass children into calm, her hands steady as she soothed trembling limbs. The surreal spectacle of the children's glowing forms, their bodies refracting light in endless fractals, seemed both otherworldly and achingly human. Meanwhile, Jax's nimble fingers danced over control panels, hacking and rerouting power to slow the encroaching security forces. His sharp eyes caught every shift in the holographic displays, every movement of the enemy. Their alliance was fragile, born of necessity, and tempered by mutual respect and shared desperation. Yet in the face of overwhelming odds, it was enough. Outside, the relentless pounding of Royce's forces grew nearer. The cold, clinical corridors seemed to close in, the sterile walls reflecting the fractured light like a prison of glass. Elara's heart pounded in her chest, every beat a fragile promise. She thought of Lumen, of the beating heart hidden beneath translucent glass, and she knew that whatever the cost, she would protect that life and all the fragile children with every fiber of her being. The battle was not just for survival. It was for the right to hope, to dream, and to exist beyond the brittle confines of their glass cages. And in that struggle, Elara found her own strength, a fierce, unyielding light, shining through the cracks of fragility. As footsteps closed in, Elara's voice rose in a steady command, rallying her allies and the children alike. The fragile alliances they had forged would be tested, and perhaps, in the breaking, something new and beautiful would be born from the shards. The night was far from over, but the fight had begun.